Brian Leonhardt here from the Leonhardt team at Coldwell Banker Realty. Today we have on a special guest, one of our agents here, Mr. Andrew Lathe. So, Andrew, can you kind of give us a little background of where you grew up, how you got into real estate, and what you did before this?
So I grew up in Hammond, Wisconsin. My mom still lives in the house I grew up in, so I have no experience from my childhood in moving on what that was like. So I guess I'm getting it out of the way as an adult. I bought 2 houses in the first 2 years of marriage, which was, a little stressful.
Yeah.
Moving twice, 2 new jobs, and 2 kids. We just really got it all out of the way right away in that. But through those experiences, I had 2 very drastically different real estate experiences in each purchase and the sale. And that just kind of is what, I guess, ignited my passion for this business, realizing how many different types of agents are out there and just how I could be a benefit to people as they walk through arguably the biggest decision in their life.
So I know you've talked about this a lot in the office of, right? It's Cold Spring, right?
Cold Spring was the second house.
Was the second house?
Yeah, Staples was my first one.
Staples was. Which was the one where you had the sewer line issue?
Dude, that was Staples. From the start, I asked my agent to write in closing costs. It was my first house, newly married, wife was on maternity leave with our first kid. We had no money, right? Yeah. And I get the settlement statement from the lender. There are no closing costs. Like, you owe $8,000. I'm like, I don't have $8,000. Like, I'm not going to close. And so I called my agent. She's like, oh no, I mean, you have your own closing costs. I'm like, I asked you. I didn't know anything about real estate.
Yeah.
Other than, I think I'm supposed to ask this question. And she kind of made it like, well, no, that's your responsibility. And like, was not going to help us at all.
Yeah.
So I, through mutual people, knew the seller. And so I got his phone number. I just called him. This is like 4 days before closing.
Oh, geez.
And I'm like, Mitch, listen, I need at least $1,500 or I can't close on the house. My agent screwed up. It's not your fault. I understand if you need to cancel and sell it to someone else, but this is where we're at. He's like, all right, let me talk to my wife. So long story short, they ended up doing it. We closed, left us with $200 in our bank account and a newborn and no income. And it's
man,
this is I was taking home $390 a week. It's like, I don't know what we're doing here. This is crazy. And then within 6 months, found out the sewer line was completely collapsed and ran diagonal under my driveway. So I had to tear out my whole driveway. But this is the middle of winter too. So they couldn't dig. Had a porta potty in our house for 6 months. That was just kind of the start, ended up with a $10,000 repair and
but thinking you were going to get closing costs, weren't able to actually, don't have enough cash on hand to be able to get to that point, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's something we kind of deal with almost every day, right?
For sure.
Of having to understand those things before we take it to the next point. With having that experience, how does that change how you take real estate for clients these days?
I always go back to, I was a new buyer. It's the first time I ever bought a house. I had no idea what to look for. And we had actually met with a couple agents and we chose, to purchase with this one because of how she walked us through the house. I felt like she pointed out concerns, issues, things that could come up. Obviously, she couldn't see the sewer line was collapsed.
Yeah.
I don't hold that issue against her at all. My frustration was that I didn't feel like she had my back with the other questions that I asked. And so I'm going through houses with any clients, whether it's the first time they bought or it's the 5th house, whatever it is. I'm always looking out for things that could become an issue down the road.
Yeah.
A lot of times that's priced into the home and that's fine, but I want to make sure that they understand what they're walking into day one. Our mechanicals are older. That's okay. We're getting a good deal on the house. We have options here. I just want you to know if they go out next week, what we're in for. Here's what you can expect to pay. Or it could last another 10 years. We have no idea, but I just want them to have an understanding of what they're walking into so as little comes up as a surprise as possible.
I think that's a really big focus we should have as real estate agents. Realizing that your buyer, as soon as they first walk into a house, they're looking at it, what it looks like is going to be the day they move in, right?
Yeah.
And when you have to look at it from the perspective of how is this house going to sit in 3 years from now or 5 years from now? Because I think that's the big thing we run into a lot when it comes to like a buyer seeing like the really pretty cosmetic house, right?
Yeah.
And they don't realize that the roof is older, or the driveway's in shambles, or their sewer line is cracked.
Wood windows that are starting to, haven't been refinished and are starting to rot out. It can cost someone $15,000.
Yeah, and where it's like you may not notice that today, or a lot of buyers may not notice it at all. It's something they kind of look past, and being able to have that expert eye or be able to take that, just go, hey, I know that everything else about this house is absolutely great. Did you realize this? Right? And I think that's one of the most important things you can do as a real estate agent is that's like, did you at least notice this? Mm-hmm. Hey, here's the things that I see that could be problematic in the future. Did you take that into account when determining how much you like this house? So I think that's one of the most important skills I think that we have. So obviously you had, what came with the condition of that house, but the other thing that popped up was obviously seller paid closing costs. And I know this from you through, working with you as much as I have, is this hyper focus on making sure that your buyer understands the financials of the contract.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of take that? Obviously that came from a pain that you had in the past, right?
Yeah. Part of it.
So how do you take that today with your clients?
I've been, I guess, just something I've always been really good at. I've been a numbers person. And so it's a huge aspect of getting into a house, not just when are you going to make your first payment. Let's actually look at the longevity of this, making sure they understand your taxes and insurance pretty much bound to go up every single year. It's not a huge dollar amount in your mortgage, but let's look at this for the next 5 years. But also if, whatever that situation is too, let's also make sure we're buying a house that we can stay in and grow into down the road if this is starting to financially push us. But I want them to understand, hey, we don't just have your 3% down payment or 10% down payment. We're going to have some closing costs in here. Now there's ways we can offset this. We can even use closing costs to buy down your rate. And just how does that affect how much you're paying for the house? At the end of the day, a seller, all they really care about is their net, what they're going to walk away with. So if we need $5,000 in closing costs to either buy down the rate, or you can't use it for your down payment, but to offset some of those other costs, then we can just increase our purchase price, $5,000, increase your monthly payment about $30, depending on, the price range of the house. But that $30 a month may play a huge difference in your emergency fund right now to fix something. If something's needing a repair, maybe you just want to change flooring when you move in. You're like, well, I need that $3,000. Get that. So you don't send that out of your pocket up front. The seller's still happy because they're walking away with the same amount of money.
Yeah, I think it's really important, obviously, when it comes to somebody starting the process or even early on, is going, do you know how much this is going to take for cash to close, right? And it's not a number that we have as real estate agents, that has to be a coordination with the lender to go, hey, they're the only ones that actually know. I can give you a rough estimate of what I think it might be, right? But in reality, for you to get those actual numbers, we have to get you connected with the lender to go, what is this going to look like? How do we structure this to make it the most beneficial for you in the short term and the long run? And do we have clarity on that? So we don't have that giant surprise when it goes, hey, we're 4 days before closing. And hey, my cash to close is now dramatically different than what I thought it was going to be. So I think as many times as we can take that to go, and I think that's our ultimate job. I think both points you brought up is this idea of clarity of going, hey, this could happen or this could happen. How do we reduce the chances of that happening? Or how do we get clarity on what that thing exactly is? I think is our biggest job, I think, as real estate agents, and tell me if you agree with this, is this idea of being able to understand what's going to happen next with as little amount of surprises as possible.
For sure. I think the best way you can make a decision is to be informed on everything that goes into it and to know all the potential different outcomes. And we're not going to know every single one of them, right? We could play out scenarios for days, but if we can know as much information as possible and then form the decision based on what makes the most sense, that's how you win. Especially, when we're working with buyers, winning isn't always, well, I got the house for $5,000 less. It's like, we won because you love this house. Maybe you have more cash in your pocket to do repairs. Maybe we did get the house a little bit cheaper. There's so many different scenarios that go into that, but the ultimate goal is for you to be happy in the house. In the way that you're the happiest is to know when you lay your head on your pillow at night, I took everything into account and I made the best decision, and I couldn't have done this better.
Right now,
with the information we have. And something may come up down the road. That pill is a lot easier to swallow. It's like, well, I knew everything else. Or with something you did know, then happens to break. It does, because it's a house. Whether it's 1 year old, brand new, it doesn't matter. The house I moved into now, most recently, is 4 years old. The day we moved in, we had a waterfall running off our egress window downstairs. Didn't think I had to deal with that in a 4-year-old house. But it's a thing, things just happen. The best way you can do that is just to be prepared.
All right, let's switch a little bit. What do you enjoy most, I think, about being a real estate agent, right? What are the kind of the big highlights, I think, of what this job kind of is?
There's a lot of stress that comes with it, but the thing I absolutely love, and the reason I keep doing it and I'm willing to endure that stress and all the other things that come along with it, is because I get to see my clients look on their face at the end. The way I view my job is just to make them happy and help them reach goals. And then the way I reach my goals is by helping other people reach theirs. And I get so much satisfaction out of their joy. And when they can look at me at the end and be like, wow, that process was maybe not easy, but a lot easier than I anticipated. Because everybody knows someone that's either sold or bought a house, and they've heard the horror stories and how much paperwork it is and stress and this step and everything. And all they hear is the bad, usually from other people. And so that process seems so difficult for them. And if I can make that a little bit easier to where they're like, wasn't bad at all, like, then it's a win. And that's what keeps me going. That's what fuels me in this business, is watching them be happy at the end of it.
Yeah. And I think that that's obviously one of the most important parts of what we do, is going, hey, you have a goal or a problem to solve, right? Mm-hmm. How am I able to get you there easier or better or with more opportunities than anybody else can? Getting to that end point and being able to enjoy that experience with your client is obviously, it's one of the most rewarding things that we can do in this business. For the good agents, I think that's usually always their focus, is going, I'm willing to handle all the stress that comes with it, which I think is also the other part of going, what is probably, you'd say, is the hardest piece of this business that maybe you didn't realize before you got into it?
It's managing that stress load from so many different facets. I mean, the contracts that you're in to times of the year where maybe there aren't contracts, and now it's a different stress load. Like, man, I got bills coming up here. And just managing this business ebbs and flows so much. And as you know, we can't control the market as much as we'd love to and just keep it steady 12 months a year, every year. Like that would be fantastic, but it's not realistic.
So you kind of speak to two parts of that. One, you're saying like the stress of just the seasonality of it, or clients that you do have there working or not. Or I mean, I think there's this too of like working with a client for 6 months or a year and they go, hey, we're no longer going to do this, right?
Yeah, that happens.
We don't get paid for any of that time that we put in for any of that, right? So there's that piece too, but then also speak kind of on that, the other part that is stressful of when you're working with the client directly. Because I think it's sometimes not realized. I think for an agent getting into this business or maybe from the outsider, it's like, well, what's so stressful about, opening a door and helping somebody buy a house?
It would be awesome if all we had to do was open doors. Yeah. Even when you look at just a contract, I mean, there's 3 negotiation points just during the time of being in contract, or from writing to inspection to appraisal potentially. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into that, but even getting to that point, I mean, you got to start with clients who oftentimes don't know you, and now you're asking them to trust you with their biggest decision that they've ever made. Frank, you got to know what you're talking about, or you left behind. You could go and interview probably 100 people on the street, and 95% of them know an agent. And so how do you differentiate yourself and then be able to know the process well enough to make it easy on your clients? But that means you carry
to protect your clients.
Your clients. And
I only think to make it easy, but also to know all the points the way go, hey, I've seen this happen in the past. This could be a problem. Here's how we solve for that problem.
And that's the other big part of that, is not just bringing potential problems to your clients, but knowing how to solve them is such a big thing as well. I mean, we see that with inspectors. And it's like you can have great inspectors who can find absolutely everything, but have no idea how to explain what those issues mean or how they're resolved to a client, and that will kill a deal. Or it just makes it a lot harder for us to come back and go, well, actually, this $25 vent cap on the roof is not a big deal. We can fix that with 4 screws. But there's so many, I guess, hands in the jar that go into that, and we're managing people. And not everyone's the same. Everyone has a different personality. That can be difficult. That's a big part of it.
I know. I think it's this of like, when you're working with a client, the stress that they feel, we also feel. So realizing that a lot of times in a real estate transaction, there's going to be stressful points to it. There's going to be a negotiation. There's going to be a problem. There's going to be a timeline or a time crunch or something unexpected that may happen, right? And that creates a ton of stress because it's just a giant decision, right? And it's people get really stressed out about it. And we 100% feel that every single time. And a lot of times we're kind of that punching bag, in a way. And I tell my clients all the time, like, I know that this is going to be frustrating at times. You can be mad. I can be your punching bag. There's so many different hands in the jar, like you said, or things that are out of our control when it comes to interest rates changing, or when it comes to maybe the lender. Like, we don't have full control over that. We don't have control necessarily on what happens with title or search on stuff. We don't have control on what's happening with the seller on the other side or the buyer on the other side, right? And what they're going through. They have their own set of things that they can't control and problems. And us to be in the middle, leading and guiding each piece to try to make it as smooth as possible and solving each problem that kind of comes up. And that, man, sometimes we have that where it's sleepless nights, right? We have problems that wake us up in the middle of the night of going, I know that this is happening, or I know that this might happen. And here's our plan of how we will solve it when it does happen. We don't know yet. We're waiting on something else that we can't control, or somebody else's answers, something else in there that we don't really get full say on, right? It's out of our control. And we just try to put the pieces together as much as possible. And we know that our clients are stressed out about it, and we are too.
And I wouldn't necessarily say a lot of times, but I try and make it a goal of mine that when a problem comes up, I don't just run to my client with that problem. It's like, hey, we have a problem. I'm going to find potentially 3 to 5 ways of here's how we're going to solve this. And maybe I'm waiting on answers from other people, before I find out if that solution is going to work or not. But at least I can then go to my client and say, hey, this came up. I've already checked with so-and-so and so-and-so to see if this solution will work. I'm waiting on an answer from them. I just want to make you aware of what we're walking through right now. But I got it. Don't worry.
I think it's looking at this perspective of, it's not our client's problem. It's also ours. Right?
100%.
And that there's situations where other agents, or we could just go, hey, here's what happened. Here you go. We're going to have to solve this. But I think what we try to do, and I think is what's really important, is to be able to go, here's the problem. Here's the solutions that we have to this. Here's my 3 best options, right, of what we have.
And we rank them.
It's like, we rank them.
This is ideal number 1. And then if for some reason that doesn't work, here's our next step. Here's where we're at.
Because there's nothing more stressful for a client than having a problem without a solution. So it's our job to be able to come up with the best solutions possible. Not our job to make the decision on those solutions, though, right? That has to come from the buyer or the seller of going, here's where we're at. Here's what we can do. Here's what I think think could be the best option. How do you guys want to handle this?
It's a lot easier for that client to make that decision when we're coming with options or solutions.
Exactly.
Rather than just problems. Because now it's not just keeping us up at night. Now it's also keeping them up at night. Yeah. Now when they're not getting sleep and they're super stressed, it's even harder to make that decision. That's a slippery slope to be in, because the easiest thing to do at that point is to cancel.
Can you think of a time when you recently went through a problem with a client and what it was, how you guys solved it?
Yeah. So it actually just had one. So I just got back from vacation. Of course, this stuff comes up on vacation, but we got the appraisal back on a home in Wisconsin, and the lender was called. It didn't get called out in the appraisal, but the lender called out from pictures in the appraisal that there was moisture in the basement. And so they wanted a foundation inspection. In the room that this happened in, the water main, city water, the water main came in, and actually in inspection, we found that the main valve was leaking. Mm-hmm. And so we had that replaced already. So we had a receipt and stuff from the plumber that was fixed. I was just very easily able to, I called the lender right away before I called my client. My client was in the email, so he knows this is a problem.
Yeah.
I responded right away and said, hey, talk to the lender. We're working this out. I'll be back with a solution here shortly. And I just talked to the lender. I'm like, hey, we have receipts. This was what the issue was. We've already fixed it. Will this solve this issue? There's not actually a foundation problem with this house, but this obviously could have been blown into way bigger issues. Now you need a foundation inspection on a 50, 60-year-old house. Yeah. I mean, there may be something, but it's not, the house isn't falling down. It's a great house, but that was able to solve that issue. And so what could have started, as a big issue for my client is he just gets an email and says, we need a foundation inspection. There's major issues here, potentially, blah, blah, blah. And that's what he's reading. First time home buyer. And it's like, this isn't an issue. Actually, we already solved this problem a week ago. I was able to squash that really quickly and then go back to him and say, hey, we got this resolved. Everything's good. Don't worry about it. Have a good rest of your day. If you have questions, give me a call. Because obviously I want to explain this more in depth for you.
Because obviously for a first time home buyer to go, hey, we have foundation issues. Like, well, what do you mean? Yep. But then also when it comes to that is going, okay, well, who's determining that we do have this, right?
Right. It didn't even come from the appraiser.
On an appraisal photo, right?
Yeah, it was the underwriter. Just saw pictures in the appraisal. There were no I read through that whole appraisal. Yeah. There were no notes of foundation issues or anything. Yeah. It's like, oh, there's staining on the wall, so that must mean there's water problems. Yeah. And it's like, well, yeah, you can see the water main right there.
Here's what happened.
And here's a new picture that shows you it's been replaced and a receipt. He's like, yeah, literally. I mean, we had it cleared in like 20 minutes. Right. It was not a big deal at all, but could have become a really big deal. Yeah. The client was already aware of, we have seen that. We had actually been in the house 3 times at that point. Yeah. He knew exactly what was coming up too. So it was just really easy. We were all on the same page and we were able to solve that.
And I think it's also that of like the amount of times that actually kind of happens during a contract. Yeah. There is at least, and I always try to preface this with each client of going, there's going to be something, a hiccup here at some point that we can't foresee. We're going to try to do everything we can to protect from any of that happening, right? But know that problems will come up. And our job is to be able to be protected that we can come up with a solution, right? And that solution is good, right? To be able to suffice to make it through or to make sure the house isn't damaged, right? Or anything like that. And there's always that time. And I was even had a conversation with a client last night as we're negotiating a contract, right? And they're apologizing to me because they're frustrated about it, right? And I'm like, you have to realize like, one, I know that like this can be frustrating. You can be emotional and upset by this. That's a lot of the reason why we're here, right? To be an intermediary of knowing that like, if this was between the seller and a buyer directly, like we couldn't have this conversation. We could never come to a decision on this. There'd be too many emotions. I think that's what's hugely important for any real estate agent to do is when you have those stressful or heated or very emotional sellers or buyers on either side is be able to take that and absorb that and go, how do we solve this and bring it in the most non-confrontational way of just problem solving to the other side is to protect them from both sides of that, but to come up with solutions as much as you can with as little emotion as possible.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that we don't validate people's emotions and what they're feeling. They're very real and it's okay to have them. You're not the only buyer or seller that has ever had emotion. Like this is a very real thing, but being able to take that back, step out of that situation and then
it's also this to realize that like heated emotions ruin negotiation.
For sure.
It doesn't work
100% of the time
to come back and yell and scream at the buyer's agent or the buyers and go, hey, we're going to do it this way or that, right? To kind of have that pushes them even farther away from something that they do want, I think that being able to control those things are huge. And also I think grand scheme of things where we're looking at the stressfulness of being an agent just in general of what the work and job is, but then also being an agent with your client of the stressful piece of that is knowing that being able to manage both sides of that is hugely important of being able to make it in this business.
And not even, and kind of what you just touched on, it's not even just managing, our own own clients stress and stuff, but there's a whole other side to a contract that we have to potentially help manage them as well. It's like, I can't come out guns a-blazing to the other agent all the time. Now, certain agents, sometimes you have to stand your ground, don't get me wrong.
Yes.
But you have to adapt to every situation and understand that every party is different.
Yes.
Every transaction is going to be different.
Yes.
Unless you happen to work with the exact same client and agent on the other side
Yes.
multiple times. I've never had that happen yet, but there's going to be sometimes small differences. The ability to foresee that and get out in front of that is what helps you win for your clients a lot of times.
Yeah. What would you say is like your 3 most important characteristics or values to being a good real estate agent?
Number 1 is honesty. 100% of the time, you have to be honest. And it's true, sometimes the truth hurts. And it's not always awesome to hear, but I will never waver on that or build any sort of dishonesty with whether it's the other agent on the other side. I'm not even representing them, but I still have a reputation to uphold, not just in this business, but in life. And so honesty for sure is number 1. Then they get a little muddled after that. I think loyalty is another huge one. And it kind of goes into just being who you said you're going to be. I explain my personality to my clients and everyone's different. I'm maybe not the best agent for every client out there. We may butt heads and they may have a better agent that they get along with personality wise, and that's okay. But I explain exactly who I am and what I expect of myself to all my clients. And then they have full transparency to hold me accountable to that. But that's just who I am. It doesn't change, whether you see me in the office or out at showings or whatever. Who I am is who I am. And 3, it always comes back to hard work. You got to be willing to put the work in for your clients. They deserve it. When you take the time off, when I was on vacation, I was on vacation. Obviously, there were a couple things that came up that I had to deal with, but I made sure I was present there as well. But when I'm working, we're doing what we can because my clients deserve that. And that's ultimately, what they're paying for, in one way or another. And if you're going to pay for it, then they should get the best that I can give.
Totally agree. Well, there you go. That's Andrew Lathe, one of our best agents on our team for sure. It's been amazing to see him kind of grow from year 1 to year 2 to year 3 into year 4, right? And has had a ton of experience and a ton of different challenges. Somebody that really truly cares about the client and the other side and really has this analytical and strategic mindset to solving people's problems. So if you ever get the chance to work with Andrew, there's definitely somebody I recommend for sure.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks
for being on the podcast with us today.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
I'll see you again.
All right.